Our family vacation to the picturesque town of Havenwood was meant to be a sanctuary, but a corrupt cop, a crooked parking job, and a casual threat quickly escalated into a federal crisis that exposed a darkness far deeper than I could have imagined. The sun was warm on my skin, a welcome stranger after months spent in fluorescent-lit offices and the perpetual gray of D.C. This vacation was non-negotiable. My son, 7-year-old Leo, deserved a mom who wasn't just a tired shadow at the end of the day. He deserved this trip to the lake, the ridiculously oversized ice cream cone that was currently melting faster than he could eat it, and a mother who could laugh without checking her phone every 5 minutes. We were in Havenwood, a small picturesque town that looked like it was pulled straight from a postcard. Quaint shops, friendly waves from strangers, and the shimmering blue of the lake. It was supposed to be our sanctuary for a week. "Mum, look! A duck!" Leo shouted, pointing a sticky finger towards the water's edge. His chocolate and strawberry-stained face was a masterpiece of pure joy. "I see him, sweetie. He's probably hoping you'll share some of that ice cream," I chuckled, ruffling his hair. We were parked in a scenic overlook spot, the front of my sensible sedan facing the water. I'd pulled in slightly crooked, too eager to get Leo to the view before his cone became a puddle in the cup holder. A minor sin, I thought. In the grand scheme of things, a crooked park job in a nearly empty lot was about as low priority as it gets. That's the thing about my line of work. You get so used to seeing the worst of humanity, the calculated cruelty, the intricate webs of deceit, that you forget about the small, petty ugliness that can fester in places that look like paradise. You forget that sometimes the biggest threats don't come from international crime syndicates. They come from a man with a badge, a fragile ego, and a 10-mile stretch of road he thinks he owns. The first sign of trouble was the slow, predatory crawl of the Havenwood police cruiser pulling up behind me. It didn't just pass by, it slowed, stopped, and then parked at an angle, effectively boxing me in. My heart didn't pound. My breath didn't catch. My training kicked in, a cold, familiar calm washing over me. For the past 12 years with the Bureau, I'd been conditioned to see the world in terms of threats, angles, and exits. Right now, I had no good exit. I watched in the rearview mirror as 2 officers got out. One was older, with a thick mustache and a gut that strained the buttons of his uniform. He walked with a swagger that was meant to project authority, but just screamed insecurity. The other was younger, wiry, with the nervous energy of a rookie, eager to impress his superior. I immediately tagged the older one as the problem. He was the one I'd have to manage. "Mom, why are the policemen here?" Leo asked, his voice small. The joy was gone, replaced by the familiar anxiety he got around strangers in uniform. "They're just doing their job, baby. Everything is fine. You just finish your ice cream," I said, my voice even and soothing, a stark contrast to the tactical assessment running through my head. 2 officers. Both appeared to be right-handed. Standard-issue Glocks, batons, no visible long guns, minimal public witnesses, 1 vulnerable civilian in my care. The older officer, whose name tag I'd later learn read Miller, tapped on my window with his knuckle, a sharp, impatient rap. I powered down the window, the scent of pine and lake air immediately replaced by the stale, vaguely intimidating smell of cheap aftershave. "Afternoon, ma'am," he said, the word ma'am coated in a thick layer of condescension. He peered into my car, his eyes lingering on my face, then my son, then the out-of-state license plates. "Is this your vehicle?" "Yes, officer, it is," I said, keeping my hands visible on the steering wheel at the 10 and 2 position. Standard de-escalation procedure. "Show you're not a threat." "You're parked a little crooked there. In fact, your front tire is over the line," he said, gesturing vaguely with his thumb. "We like folks to respect the lines here in Havenwood." "My apologies, officer. I was just excited to show my son the view. I can straighten it up right away." I made a slight move towards the ignition. "Whoa, hold on there," he said, putting a hand on the door. "Let's not be in such a hurry. License and registration, please." This was the part where a routine stop becomes something else. The pretext. He didn't care about the parking line. This was a fishing expedition. I reached slowly, deliberately, for the glove compartment, announcing my every move. I'm just getting my registration, officer. It's right in here. I handed him the documents, along with my driver's license. He took them, his eyes scanning my D.C. license with a smirk. Washington, D.C., huh? Long way from home. What brings you all the way out here? The question wasn't friendly. It was an interrogation. We're on vacation, just visiting for the week, I said, my gaze steady. I didn't look at the rookie, Davis, who was standing back by the passenger side, trying to look intimidating but mostly just looking uncomfortable. I kept my focus on Miller. He was the one running the show. Miller stared at my license photo, then back at me. Jada. That's an interesting name. He held onto the documents for a beat too long, letting the silence stretch. It was a power play, meant to make me nervous. It was also textbook. I'd run this exact playbook on low-level informants. Is there a problem, officer? I finally asked, my tone still polite but firm. His eyes flicked to the back seat, where Leo was now sitting frozen, ice cream forgotten in his lap. Who's the boy? The cold calm I'd been maintaining began to crack. A sliver of ice slid down my spine. He's my son. Your son? Miller repeated, drawing the words out. He shared a look with Davis, a disgusting, conspiratorial glance that made my blood run cold. The subtext was sickeningly clear. A black woman in a nice car with an out-of-state plate and a light-skinned child. Something must be wrong with this picture. Yes, my son, Leo, I said, my voice dropping an octave. The mom was fading. The agent was surfacing. Now, if you've finished, I'd like my license and registration back. We were just about to leave. Miller ignored me. He leaned down, trying to peer into my car more closely. You seem awfully nervous, Jada. Got something to hide in here? Any illegal substances? Narcotics? He sniffed the air theatrically. Sometimes people from the big city bring their problems out to our quiet little towns. I could feel Leo start to tremble in the back. This had gone far enough. Officer, you have my information. You have no probable cause to search my vehicle. Am I being detained, or am I free to go? The official language, the clear assertion of my rights, seemed to infuriate him. His face hardened. The folksy, condescending mask dropped, revealing pure, unfiltered malice. You're being detained because I'm detaining you, he spat. You've got an attitude problem, you know that. We see your kind all the time. Come out here thinking the rules don't apply. His eyes landed on Leo's small backpack on the passenger seat. In the side pocket was a bottle of children's chewable ibuprofen I'd bought at the pharmacy that morning. Miller's eyes lit up with a sick kind of triumph. Well, well, what do we have here? He said, pointing. What are those pills? That's children's ibuprofen, I said through gritted teeth. For my son, he gets headaches. Uh-huh, ibuprofen, he said, making air quotes with his fingers. Looks like a whole bottle of pills to me. You know, it's amazing what they put drugs in these days. That was it. The line wasn't just crossed, it was obliterated. He was inventing a crime in front of my 7-year-old child, terrorizing him for sport. The cool, detached professionalism I had clung to shattered into a million pieces, replaced by the white-hot rage of a mother protecting her cub. But I knew losing my temper was exactly what he wanted. It would be his justification. Officer Miller, I said, my voice dangerously low and steady. You're making a serious mistake. He laughed, a short, ugly bark. The only one making a mistake here is you. He turned to his partner. Davis, get on the radio. Tell them we have a possible 1031, narcotics possession. Suspect is uncooperative. A possible 1031, a crime in progress for children's pain reliever. The absurdity was staggering, but the threat was very real. I saw Leo's eyes well up with tears, and a switch flipped in my brain. The vacation was over. Miller turned back to me, his hand resting casually on the top of his holster. The smug grin on his face was one of the most punchable things I had ever seen in my life, and I've seen a lot. He leaned in close to my window, his voice a low growl meant only for me. It's time to stop playing games. I'm going to ask you one more time to step out of the car. We're going to have a little look around, and if you resist, I promise you, things are going to get a whole lot worse for you, and for your boy. The threat hung in the air, thick and suffocating. It was a promise wrapped in procedure, a threat to my son delivered with the full, crushing weight of a badge. I looked from Miller's smug, cruel face to the reflection in the side mirror, where I could see Leo's small form huddled in his car seat, his face streaked with tears and melted ice cream. In that moment, the world narrowed to two objectives: protect my son and end this. I took a slow, deliberate breath, forcing the white-hot rage back down. Panic was a luxury I couldn't afford. Fear was a weapon he was trying to use against me, and I would not hand it to him. "I will step out of the car," I said, my voice as level as the horizon over the lake. "But my son stays put. The windows stay up, and the doors stay locked from the inside. Your partner will step away from the passenger side and remain where I can see him. Those are my terms." Miller's eyebrows shot up in disbelief, followed by a derisive snort. "You're in no position to be making terms, lady. I'm a mother protecting her child from two armed men who are behaving in a threatening manner," I stated, my eyes locking onto his. "You want compliance. That's how you get it. Otherwise, you'll have to break this window and drag me out in front of my 7-year-old, and I don't think that's a headline the Havenwood Police Department is looking for. Do you?" I glanced over at Davis. The rookie's face was pale. He looked from me to Miller, a flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. He was the weak link. I'd just given him an image, a narrative he didn't want to be a part of. Miller's jaw tightened. He was furious that I'd called his bluff, that I wasn't cowering. But he also knew I was right. A violent extraction would be a PR nightmare. "Fine," he gritted out. "Davis, back up. Let's see what she's hiding." I turned to Leo, my face softening instantly. "Hey, superstar," I whispered, reaching back to squeeze his knee. "Mommy just needs to talk to these officers for a minute. I want you to press the lock button right here, okay? And don't open it for anyone but me. You can watch a show on my phone. Can you do that for me?" He nodded, his lower lip trembling as he swiped a tear from his cheek. He was scared, but he was brave. My brave little boy. I handed him my phone, unlocked it to his favorite cartoon, and watched as his small thumb pressed the lock button on the door panel. The click was the most reassuring sound I had ever heard. Only then did I turn back to the officers. I opened the door and stepped out, moving with a fluid economy of motion that comes from years of training. I didn't slam the door, just closed it firmly. I stood tall, my 5'9" frame feeling taller, my hands held loosely at my sides, away from my body. I was making myself an open book, a non-threat, while my mind catalogued everything. Miller's stance was aggressive, angled towards me. Davis was hanging back, looking like he'd rather be anywhere else on Earth. The wind had picked up, carrying the faint sound of a boat motor from across the lake. "All right, I'm out," I said. "Now, what is this really about, Officer Miller? The parking job? Or the fact that you saw a black woman driving a car you don't think she should be driving?" The accusation hit him like a physical blow. His face flushed a blotchy red. "You watch your mouth. This is about a possible narcotics violation." He jabbed a finger toward my car. "You're a long way from D.C. We get your type coming through here, thinking you can peddle your poison in our town." "My type?" I asked, letting the words hang in the air. "The only poison in that car is the children's ibuprofen you're trying to build a fantasy case around. You know it, I know it, and I'm pretty sure Officer Davis knows it too." I cut my eyes to Davis again. He flinched, refusing to meet my gaze. He knew this was wrong. Good. A guilty conscience is a liability in a firefight and a legal battle. Miller was done talking. He took a step forward and grabbed my left arm, his fingers digging into my bicep. "That's it. You're under arrest for obstruction. Turn around. Hands behind your back." The moment his hand touched me, the tactical part of my brain took over completely. I didn't resist, didn't pull away. That would be resisting arrest. Instead, I remained perfectly still, my body rigid. "Officer Miller, you are now putting your hands on me without cause," I said, my voice hard and clear. "Officer Davis, note the time. It is 3:42 p.m. Your partner has just initiated an unlawful physical contact. You are a witness." "Shut up," Miller snarled, yanking my arm harder. "Davis, get over here and help me cuff her." Davis hesitated for a half-second, a fatal pause in the dance of police procedure. He knew this was spiraling. "Before you assault me further," I said, my voice cutting through Miller's anger like a surgeon's scalpel, "I am informing you that I am invoking my right to legal counsel, and I am requesting that you call your direct supervisor to this scene, immediately. You can call a lawyer from the station after you're booked." Miller tried to twist my arm behind my back, but I held my ground, using my core strength to resist the movement without actively fighting him. "No," I said, looking him dead in the eye. "I think I'll make a call right now." In a flash, I used my free right hand to pull my second phone from my jacket pocket. Not the one Leo was using, but my work phone. The one he didn't know about. It was a burnished gray, nondescript, but infinitely more powerful. My thumb hit the speed dial before Miller could even process what was happening. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" he roared, trying to grab for the phone. I turned my body, shielding the phone as it rang once, twice, and then connected. I didn't say hello. I just spoke. "This is Nightingale," I said, my voice dropping into a clipped official cadence that was foreign to this lakeside overlook. It was a voice that gave orders and expected them to be followed. "I have a code 18 situation. Repeat code 18. Location is Lakeview Overlook, Havenwood, North Carolina. I am engaged with 2 hostile LEOs, badge numbers 312 and 455. 1 civilian minor is on site. I am invoking Protocol 7 and require immediate federal intervention. Acknowledge." Miller and Davis froze. They stared at me, their faces a mixture of confusion and dawning horror. They had no idea what a Code 18 was. They didn't know who Nightingale was, but they understood the tone. They understood the words federal intervention. A tinny, professional voice came through the phone's speaker, loud enough for them both to hear. "Acknowledged, Nightingale. Protocol 7 is engaged. Asset is en route to your location. ETA 18 minutes. Hold your position. Overwatch is active." Miller's face went from red to ghost white. He finally let go of my arm as if it had burned him. Who was that?" he stammered. I didn't answer. I just looked at him, letting the weight of his monumental error settle over him. I had just called in a tactical team. To a parking dispute. His career, his pension, his entire world was about to come crashing down. He had harassed the wrong mother. He had poked the wrong bear. He stared at my phone, then at me, his mind racing, trying to connect dots that were far outside his jurisdiction. The rage returned, now mixed with pure, cornered animal panic. He made a lunge not for me, but for the phone, the source of his impending doom. "You're not!" he shouted, his hand swatting at my own. He wasn't trying to grab it. He was trying to destroy it. His palm connected with the device, knocking it from my grasp. It flew through the air in a perfect, sickening arc before landing on the asphalt with a sharp crack. The screen spiderwebbed into 1,000 pieces, the connection to the outside world severed. But the call was made. The clock was ticking, and I was alone, with my son locked in the car, facing 2 increasingly desperate and terrified cops who now knew I was someone important, someone dangerous, and they had just destroyed my only lifeline. Silence. The only sounds were the cawing of a distant gull and the quiet hum of my car's engine. The shattered phone lay on the ground between us, a black mirror reflecting the suddenly overcast sky. Miller stood panting, his hand still outstretched, as if he could somehow take back the last 5 seconds. Davis looked like he was about to be sick. The bravado, the arrogance, the casual cruelty, it had all evaporated, replaced by the stark, cold terror of men who have just realized they are in over their heads. You broke my phone," I said, my voice deceptively calm. I didn't look at the broken device. I looked at Miller. I wanted him to see the complete absence of fear in my eyes. I wanted him to understand that he hadn't cut me off. He just untethered me. "What was that? What did you do?" Davis finally choked out, his voice a panicked squeak. He took a half-step back, creating distance not just from me, but from his partner. The first crack in their united front. I ignored him and kept my gaze fixed on Miller. 18 minutes, I said softly. That was your window, the time you had to de-escalate, apologize, and walk away from this with your careers intact. Now that window is closing. Miller's panic was curdling back into aggression. It was all he had left. I don't know what kind of game you think you're playing, but you're under arrest. You assaulted an officer. I did no such thing, and your partner knows it. I cut him off, my voice like ice. What you did, Officer Miller, was escalate a non-incident into a felony. You conducted an illegal stop based on racial profiling. You attempted an illegal search. You unlawfully detained a private citizen, threatened a minor, and committed assault and battery. And then, to top it all off, you destroyed personal property while actively interfering with a federal agent in the performance of her duties. And that last one? That one's going to be the real problem for you, i.e. The words federal agent landed in the quiet space between us with the force of a grenade. Davis's eyes widened to the size of dinner plates. He looked at me, at my plain clothes, my mom car, my crying son, and tried to reconcile it with the image of a G-woman. Miller just stared, his mouth opening and closing silently, like a fish gasping for air. You're lying, he finally managed, but the words had no conviction. The confidence was gone. He was just a bully whose victim had refused to flinch. Am I? I took a deliberate step towards him. He instinctively took a step back. The power dynamic had irrevocably shifted. Let's play this out, shall we? In approximately 16 minutes now. A black, unmarked helicopter is going to appear over that ridge. It won't have any lights. It will make almost no sound. It will land in that field right over there. 6 men in tactical gear are going to get out. They won't be wearing anything that says police. They will be carrying weapons that make your standard issue Glock look like a toy. They won't talk to you. They won't ask you questions. Their only objective will be to secure me and the civilian minor, my son. Then, and only then, will someone come talk to you. And that person will be from the Office of Professional Responsibility, and they will want to know in excruciating detail why you forced a senior special agent of the Federal Bureau of Investigation to trigger a Code 18 alert during her approved personal leave. I let the story sink in, painting a vivid picture of the storm that was about to break over their heads. Every detail was precise, plausible, and designed to dismantle their remaining composure. Your FBI? Davis whispered, the question filled with a kind of horrified awe. Senior Special Agent Jada Williams, Counterterrorism Division, I said, the words feeling strange in this peaceful, lakeside setting. And you two have just made my vacation a national security issue. Miller was crumbling. The veins on his neck bulged, his face a mask of pure desperation. He looked at the shattered phone on the ground, then at his cruiser, then back at me. He was trapped. He could run, but where would he go? The FBI has a long reach. He could try to undo the damage, but the call was already made. The cavalry was coming, and he was on the wrong side of the charge. His desperation found a new, terrible focus. He looked past me, at my car, at the most vulnerable part of my world. "Get in the car," he suddenly snarled, his voice a low, ragged command. It wasn't a request. It was an order born of pure terror. "I'm not going anywhere," I said. "Get in the car," he repeated, his hand dropping to the grip of his holstered weapon. Not to draw it, but to remind me it was there. "We're leaving. Now. Before—" His voice trailed off. "Before the helicopter. Before the end of his world." "No," I said simply. "This isn't a request," he screamed, finally losing the last shred of his composure. He took a step towards me, his eyes wild. "You made this mess. You're going to fix it. We're going to be gone before anyone gets here. You're going to tell them it was a misunderstanding, a false alarm." "It's too late for that, officer," I said, planting my feet. I wasn't moving. My son was in that car. My entire world was in that car. I was the wall that stood between him and it. The sound of a click echoed in the tense silence. It was the sound of Miller unholstering his weapon. He didn't point it at me. He pointed it at the ground, but the message was clear. His finger was on the trigger. Davis, to his credit, finally found his voice. "Miller, what are you doing? Put it away. Don't make this worse." "Shut up, Davis. She's the one who made it worse." Miller was hyperventilating now, his gaze darting between me and the empty sky. He was no longer a cop. He was just a cornered man with a gun, the most dangerous creature on the planet. "Let's all just calm down," I said. raising my hands slowly, palms out. De-escalation. Always de-escalation. Officer Miller, look at me. You have a choice right now. You can put the weapon away, and we can wait here and sort this out like professionals. It will be bad for you, I won't lie. But you will go home tonight. If you continue down this path, you won't. His eyes were glazed over. He wasn't listening. He was trapped in the catastrophic future I had painted for him, and he was looking for any way out. His gaze flickered again to my car, to the driver's side door, and then I saw it, the glint of metal in my hand, my car keys. He wasn't looking at me. He was looking at the keys. His plan, insane as it was, clicked into place in my mind a half-second before he acted. He didn't want to hurt me. He wanted to contain me. He wanted to take me, and my son, and run. Use us as leverage, a shield. He lunged, not at me, but at the keys in my hand. His movements were clumsy, sloppy with panic. It was the kind of move that would get a rookie washed out of Quantico in a week. But he was bigger than me, and desperate. Training took over. I pivoted on my back foot, using his momentum against him. As he lunged past me, I brought my right elbow up and around in a sharp, brutal arc, connecting squarely with the side of his head, just behind the ear. It was a precise, targeted strike, designed to disorient, not incapacitate. He stumbled, letting out a grunt of pain and surprise, his grip on the gun loosening for a critical instant. I didn't hesitate. I followed through, my hand striking his wrist, a sharp slap of flesh on flesh. The Glock clattered to the asphalt, spinning away from both of us. Simultaneously, I heard a gasp from behind me. It was Leo. The commotion had drawn him to the window. His small face was pressed against the glass, his eyes wide with terror. He had just seen his mother strike a police officer. Miller staggered back, shaking his head to clear it. The rage in his eyes was now murderous. The thin veneer of law and order was completely gone. He was just a thug who had been challenged. You bitch, he roared and charged at me. But Davis, who had been frozen in indecision, finally chose a side. He stepped between us, his arms outstretched. Miller, stop, it's over, just stop. Miller shoved his younger partner aside with a roar of fury. Davis tumbled to the ground, and Miller kept coming at me. He was unarmed now, but he was a bull, fueled by adrenaline and the terror of imminent ruin. He was going to take me down with his bare hands. I braced myself for the impact, ready to meet his charge. But before he could reach me, a new sound cut through the air. It wasn't a helicopter. It was the high-pitched squeal of tires on asphalt, coming up the scenic road fast. A second Havenwood police cruiser, lights flashing but siren off, fishtailed to a stop behind Miller's car. A third officer, a burly sergeant with a graying flat top, jumped out of the driver's seat, his weapon already drawn and pointed in our direction. "Drop it! Everybody on the ground now," he bellowed, his voice accustomed to command. Miller froze, halfway between me and his downed partner. Davis was pushing himself up from the ground. I stood with my hands still raised. We were all caught in a terrifying tableau. The sergeant's eyes darted between us, trying to make sense of the scene. Two of his officers, one on the ground, one disarmed, and a civilian woman who looked like she was in command of the entire situation. "Miller, what the hell is going on here?" the sergeant yelled. Before Miller could invent another lie, before he could try to spin this, I spoke, my voice cutting cleanly through the tension. "Sergeant," I said, my gaze locking with his, "arrest this man. He has assaulted his partner and committed aggravated assault against a federal officer." The sergeant stared at me, his expression hardening with suspicion. "Federal officer? I don't see any badge, lady." Miller saw his opening. A last, desperate chance. "She's lying, Sarge. She's the one who assaulted us. She's some kind of drug runner from D.C. The kid's probably a hostage." My blood ran cold. He had just handed the sergeant a plausible, terrifying narrative. Drug runner. Hostage. In a split second, I had gone from the victim to the villain in the eyes of the arriving officer. The sergeant's knuckles whitened on the grip of his gun. His aim shifted, the barrel of his weapon now pointing directly at my chest. The muzzle of the sergeant's gun was a black, unblinking eye. In that single, terrifying second, My status, my training, and the truth were all meaningless. All he saw was what Miller had painted: a dangerous, unknown woman, a potential criminal, and I was the immediate threat. "Don't move," the sergeant commanded, his voice a low growl. "Hands on your head. Now." My mind raced faster than my heart. I had less than a second to make a decision that would determine if I lived or died. Complying was the standard protocol. It showed I wasn't a threat. But in this scenario, compliance meant letting Miller control the narrative. If they put me in cuffs, the game was over. I would be silenced, a suspect, and Leo would be in the hands of these men. Unacceptable. "Sergeant, my name is Senior Special Agent Jada Williams," I said, my voice staying remarkably even despite the gun pointed at my heart. I did not put my hands on my head. Instead, I lowered them slowly, deliberately, to my sides. It was an act of defiance, a calculated risk. It told him I wasn't a scared suspect. I was an officer of the law, holding her ground. My badge and credentials are in my jacket, left-hand inner pocket. But if you want to verify my status immediately, you can look at your partner's face. Look at Officer Davis. He knows who I am. He knows Officer Miller is lying. I flicked my eyes towards Davis, who was now back on his feet, his face a mess of conflicting emotions. He was trapped between loyalty to his partner and the terrifying truth. His silence was damning Miller more than any words could. The sergeant's gaze shifted to Davis. "Davis, report. What is your situation?" Davis looked from Miller's murderous glare to my steady, calm. He swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing. "Sarge, she's telling the truth. Miller, he lost it. He tried to arrest her on a bogus charge." The admission hung in the air, a stunning betrayal in the blue-clad fraternity. Miller let out a strangled cry of rage. "He's lying. She's gotten to him." The sergeant was now utterly confused, his gun wavering slightly between me and Miller. He was a man caught in a procedural nightmare. His instincts were telling him one of his own was compromised, but everything in his training told him to trust the badge. I pressed my advantage. "Sergeant, in approximately 12 minutes, a federal tactical team will be landing in that field. That call is not reversible. When they arrive, they will find you pointing a loaded weapon at a federal agent. I am giving you the opportunity, right now, to be on the right side of the situation when my people get here. Holster your weapon, secure Officer Miller, and establish a perimeter. That is your best and only play." I wasn't just giving him information, I was giving him an order, cloaked as advice. I was speaking his language. Perimeter, secure, situation. "My people?" the sergeant repeated, his brow furrowed. "Who are your people?" Before I could answer, a new sound began to bleed into the tense quiet. It was faint at first, a rhythmic low-frequency thumping that seemed to vibrate in my teeth. It wasn't the sound of a car. It was the sound of rotors cutting through the air. But it was too soon, way too soon. My heart sank. 18 minutes was a precise calculation. If someone was arriving now, it wasn't my team. It was something else. All three officers heard it, their heads tilted upwards, searching the graying sky. The sound grew louder, closer. It was a helicopter, but not the silent, unmarked bird I had described. This was loud, a local news chopper or maybe a medical transport, its distinctive whoomp, whoomp, whoomp echoing off the hills around the lake. Miller's head snapped towards the sound, and a flicker of something not hope, but a new, wild desperation ignited in his eyes. He saw the chopper as a witness, an audience. Maybe he thought he could play the victim, spin the story for a wider audience. "See? I told you," he yelled, pointing at me. "She's got backup. She's part of something bigger. She's dangerous." He was trying to reframe the arrival, to twist it to fit his crumbling narrative. The sergeant was now completely off balance. The approaching helicopter had thrown a new, unpredictable variable into the mix. His focus was split. And in that moment of distraction, Miller acted. He didn't charge me again. He didn't go for the sergeant. He scrambled for his dropped Glock, which lay on the asphalt just a few feet away. "Gun!" Davis screamed, his training finally kicking in. The sergeant's head whipped back around. He saw Miller diving for the weapon. He shouted, "Miller, no!" and swung his own weapon towards him. but I was closer. I didn't think. I moved. I launched myself forward, not at Miller, but at the gun. My body hit the ground hard, my shoulder absorbing the impact as I slid across the rough pavement. My fingers closed around the cool, checkered grip of the Glock a split second before Miller's. I had the weapon. I rolled, coming up onto one knee, the gun held in a perfect two-handed FBI stance, sights aligned on Miller's center mass. He was on his hands and knees, his face just inches from mine, his eyes wide with shock and fury that I had beaten him to it. "Federal agent, drop your weapon," I shouted, my voice ringing with authority. I wasn't speaking to Miller anymore. I was speaking to the sergeant. I was identifying myself and giving a lawful order. The sergeant, seeing me now armed and aiming at his fellow officer, was faced with an impossible choice. He still had his gun raised, his aim shifting between me and Miller. From inside my car, I heard a terrified sob. "Mommy!" Leo's cry cut through the adrenaline. It was a reminder of what was at stake. I couldn't risk a single shot being fired. "Everybody freeze!" I commanded, my voice cracking like a whip. "Sergeant, I am ordering you to holster your weapon. Officer Davis, secure your partner. Do it now." Miller, unarmed and on his knees, looked up at me, a venomous, defeated sneer on his face. "You're not going to shoot me," he rasped, his voice filled with a strange, chilling confidence. "You're a Fed. You have rules. You can't just shoot an unarmed man." He was right. My rules of engagement were strict. He was no longer an imminent threat. Shooting him now would be murder. And he knew it. Slowly, deliberately, he began to push himself up from the ground. A defiant smirk played on his lips. He was calling my bluff. He was betting his life that my professionalism was a cage, a weakness he could exploit. He was betting I wouldn't cross that final line. The sound of the helicopter was deafening now, hovering somewhere directly overhead, the downdraft whipping my hair across my face. The sergeant was yelling something I couldn't hear over the noise. Davis was hesitantly approaching Miller from behind, and Miller, his eyes locked on mine, got to his feet. He took a slow, deliberate step towards me. He wasn't reaching for a weapon. He wasn't threatening me. He was just closing the distance, violating my space, proving to everyone that I was powerless to stop him. He was trying to humiliate me, to strip away my authority in front of the other officers. Another step. He was only an arm's length away. I could smell the stale coffee on his breath. His smirk widened. "What are you going to do now, Agent?" he whispered, his voice dripping with mockery. He raised his hand, not in a fist, not to attack, but slowly, with his palm open. He was going to touch me. He was going to put his hand on my weapon, to prove his dominance, to show everyone that he was untouchable. And he knew that if I shot him for that, I'd be the one going to prison. My finger tightened on the trigger, the cold metal a final, terrible line I couldn't cross. He had me. He had won. His hand moved through the air in slow motion, an act of supreme arrogance. The smirk on his face was a mask of triumph. He thought he had me cornered, trapped by the very regulations I had sworn to uphold. My finger trembled on the trigger, a war raging within me. The agent knew the protocol. He was unarmed, his hands were visible, lethal force was not authorized. But the mother saw a monster reaching for her, a direct and present danger to her child's world, and she was screaming to pull the trigger. But I was neither just an agent nor just a mother. I was both, and I had more tools in my arsenal than a 9mm pistol. Just as his fingertips were about to brush against the barrel of my gun, I made my move. It wasn't a shot, it was a pivot. In one fluid motion, I dropped my left shoulder, twisted my hips, and took a sharp step back and to the side, breaking the line of his advance. The gun never wavered from his center mass, but I was no longer a stationary target. Simultaneously, my left hand, which had been supporting my shooting grip, shot out. It wasn't a punch. It was an open palm strike, a technique designed for control, not damage. My palm connected squarely with his chest, right on his sternum. It wasn't a hard blow, but it was perfectly timed with my pivot, exploiting his forward momentum. He had been expecting me to stand my ground or to shoot. He was prepared for resistance. He was not prepared for me to simply get out of his way and push. The effect was immediate and dramatic. He stumbled forward, his arrogant advance turning into a clumsy, uncontrolled fall. He flailed his arms, trying to regain his balance, but it was useless. He crashed to his hands and knees on the asphalt for the second time, his triumphant smirk replaced by a mask of stunned disbelief. He had tried to use my rules against me, but he'd forgotten one thing. I make the rules. Officer Davis, I will not ask you again. Secure your partner now, or I will consider you an accessory to his crimes, I barked, my voice cutting through the roar of the helicopter. This time Davis didn't hesitate. He saw his partner on the ground, me standing over him with a gun, and the career he'd barely started flashing before his eyes. He lunged forward, grabbing Miller's arms and wrenching them behind his back, with a practiced, if slightly panicked, efficiency. He fumbled for his cuffs. "Sarge, help me," Davis yelled over the wind and noise. The sergeant, who had been watching this bizarre ballet of power with his jaw hanging open, was finally jolted back into action. He holstered his weapon and moved in to assist, his face a grim mask of resignation. He knew, with absolute certainty, that he had backed the wrong horse. As they wrestled a cursing and struggling Miller into submission, I kept the Glock trained on him, not relaxing for a second until I heard the satisfying double click of the handcuffs. Only then did I lower the weapon, engaging the safety and holding it pointed at the ground. I stood up, my knees aching from the impact with the pavement, my entire body humming with adrenaline. The helicopter, a big blue and white machine with a local Channel 8 News logo on its side, was now descending, clearly intending to land in the adjacent field. They had stumbled upon the police incident of a lifetime. I ignored them. My priority was singular. I turned and walked back to my car. Through the window I could see Leo's terrified face. I gave him a small, reassuring smile that I didn't feel, and mouthed the words, "It's okay now." I retrieved my shattered work phone from the ground. The screen was dead, but the SIM card and the internal memory were likely intact. Evidence. I tucked it into my pocket. Then I walked over to the two stunned local officers. The sergeant looked at me, his expression a mixture of respect and utter dread. "Ma'am, Agent, He couldn't find the words. "Your name and badge number," I said, my voice flat, devoid of emotion. "Sergeant Frank Miller, badge 187, he said, his voice hoarse. He was no relation to the other Miller, a fact for which he was likely now eternally grateful. "Sergeant Miller," I began, my voice taking on the official tone of an after-action report. "You arrived on a volatile scene. You failed to properly assess the situation, drew your weapon on a federal officer, and nearly allowed a suspect to regain control of a firearm. It was not your finest hour." He flinched as if I'd slapped him. I was responding to a call. You saw what you expected to see," I cut him off. "And you almost made a fatal mistake. Your officer," I gestured to the cuffed and seething Miller, who was being shoved into the back of his own cruiser by Davis, "is a disgrace to his uniform and a danger to the public. I want him processed, and I want him held. No bail. I will be handling the federal charges myself. Am I understood?" "Yes, ma'am. Crystal clear," Sergeant Miller said, nodding vigorously. The fight had completely drained out of him. "Good," I said. I ejected the magazine from Miller's Glock, cleared the chamber, and handed the weapon and the magazine to the sergeant. "Grip first. Secure this as evidence." He took it gingerly, as if it were a venomous snake. Just then, the downdraft from the landing news helicopter blasted us with a wave of wind and dust. A woman with a microphone and a cameraman in tow came jogging towards the police tape that the sergeant was now hastily stringing up. My week of quiet anonymity was officially over. This was a mess. A huge, public, interagency mess that would generate mountains of paperwork and require hours of testimony. My vacation was not just over. It was radioactive. My face was about to be plastered on the local news, which would inevitably be picked up by national outlets. For a counterterrorism agent who often works undercover, that's a catastrophic failure. But as I looked at the news crew approaching, a cold, hard thought began to form in my mind. Maybe this wasn't a disaster. Maybe it was an opportunity. Miller and the Havenwood PD had tried to operate in the shadows, to use the isolation of this scenic overlook to intimidate and harass someone they thought had no power. They thrived in darkness. Well, I was about to drag them into the brightest spotlight they had ever seen. I turned to Sergeant Miller. Sergeant, I need you to do one more thing for me. I need you to call your chief of police. Tell him to get down here right now, and tell him to bring his public affairs officer with him. We're going to have a press conference. The sergeant's eyes widened in alarm. A press conference? Here? Now? Right here. Right now, I confirmed. I looked towards the news crew, who were being held back by a now very compliant Officer Davis. I gave the reporter a brief, almost imperceptible nod. Her eyes lit up. She'd just been handed the scoop of the year. This wasn't just about Officer Miller anymore. This was about the systemic rot that allowed a man like him to wear a badge. He didn't operate in a vacuum. He felt empowered, protected. I was about to strip all of that away, not in a quiet internal affairs report that could be buried, but live, on camera for the entire world to see. But as I formulated my plan, a chilling new thought intruded, cold and sharp as a shard of glass. I had made a call. A code 18. I had summoned a ghost squad from the highest echelons of the Bureau. I had told the sergeant they would be here in minutes. The news helicopter had arrived instead, a random coincidence that had saved me. But what about my team? My blood ran cold. The call was real. The protocol was real. Overwatch was active, and they were still coming. An elite federal tactical team was about to descend on what was now a developing media circus, and I had no way to call them off. My phone was smashed. There was no abort code I could give through local channels. They were a silent, unstoppable force, and in approximately 6 minutes, they were going to turn this local news story into a national incident of terrifying proportions. 6 minutes. It might as well have been 6 seconds. My mind, trained for tactical analysis, began running disaster scenarios at warp speed. My team operated under strict, sterile protocols. They would arrive, secure the asset me, and neutralize all perceived threats. A local cop with a gun, a news crew with a camera. In the heat of a tactical landing, they could all look like threats. This could go from a PR disaster to a bloodbath in the blink of an eye. The reporter, a woman in her 30s with the hungry eyes of a shark who'd scented blood, was practically vibrating with excitement behind the police tape. "Ma'am, can you give us a statement? What happened here? We're live in 3 minutes." I had to control the situation, and I had to do it now. The press conference wasn't just an opportunity anymore. It was a shield. It was the only thing I could think of to turn this chaotic scene into something recognizable, something non-threatening, before my guys showed up and saw a hornet's nest. "Sergeant," I said, turning back to the pale-faced officer. "Radio your dispatch. Tell them to clear a 5-mile radius of all air traffic, effective immediately. Tell them it's a federal order. Use the phrase, Nightingale Protocol. They won't know what it means, but the system will. It might buy us a few minutes." He stared at me, dumbfounded, but nodded and scrambled back to his cruiser, grabbing his radio. The phrase was a deep state emergency code, a digital hand grenade I'd just thrown into the local emergency communications network. It would cause chaos, but it would also get attention at the highest levels. Maybe, just maybe, someone in a DC command center would see the flag, connect it to my location, see the live news feed, and have the sense to put my team in a holding pattern. It was a long shot. I turned my attention to the reporter. 2 minutes, I said, holding up 2 fingers. I walked towards the police tape, and Davis, the rookie, flinched back as if I were radioactive. I gave him a look. "Let her through, officer. She and her cameraman." Davis looked to his sergeant for confirmation. The sergeant, his hand still on his radio, gave a short, sharp nod. The tape was lifted. The press was in. "Agent Williams," the reporter said, extending a hand as she and her cameraman scurried towards me. I ignored the hand. This wasn't a friendly chat. "Can you tell us what happened?" "You're live?" I asked, my eyes on the cameraman as he hoisted the heavy equipment onto his shoulder. "In 90 seconds, yes," she replied. "All business." "Good," I said. I pointed towards my sedan, where Leo was still watching, his face a small, pale oval against the tinted glass. "I want your camera pointed at me, but I want my car. with my son inside it, visible in the background over my shoulder. Frame it so the lake is behind him. Make it look peaceful. Do you understand? She blinked, momentarily thrown by the specific stage direction, but she was a pro. She saw the power in the image I was creating. The calm, composed federal agent, the innocent child, the idyllic background, all contrasted with the flashing lights of the police cars. "I understand," she said, relaying the instructions to her cameraman. The next minute was a blur of activity. The sergeant barked orders into his radio. Davis stood guard over Miller in the back of the cruiser, who was now eerily silent. I took a deep breath and walked to my car, crouching down to speak to Leo through the glass. "Hey, buddy," I said, forcing another smile. "You see that man with the camera? He's going to put Mommy on TV. You're going to be on TV too in the background. Isn't that cool? I need you to just sit tight for a few more minutes. You are being so brave. I am so proud of you." He just nodded, his eyes huge. He didn't understand what was happening, but he understood that the danger had, for the moment, passed. I walked back to my designated spot. The reporter was holding a microphone, an earpiece in her ear. 10 seconds, she mouthed. I straightened my jacket, brushed a stray piece of hair from my face, and looked directly into the camera lens. The small red light blinked on. I was live. "Good afternoon," I began, my voice clear and steady. "My name is Jada Williams. I'm a senior special agent with the Federal Bureau of Investigation, and I am on approved personal leave with my 7-year-old son." I paused, letting that sink in. I was establishing my identity, my authority, and my role as a mother all in one sentence. Less than an hour ago, my son and I were parked right here, enjoying the view, when we were illegally detained and terrorized by Officer Miller of the Havenwood Police Department. I gestured with my head towards the cruiser where Miller was being held. With no probable cause, Officer Miller accused me of narcotics possession, attempted to illegally search my vehicle, and threatened both my safety and the safety of my child. His actions were not a matter of procedure. They were a gross and malicious abuse of power, predicated on racial bias. I could see the reporter's eyes widen. This was bigger than she could have ever imagined. "Let me be perfectly clear," I continued, my voice hardening. "The badge is not a shield for bigotry. The uniform is not a license for intimidation. The men and women who wear it swear an oath to protect and serve all members of the public, not just the ones they deem worthy. Officer Miller and any officer who stands by and allows such behavior to occur have not only broken the law, they have violated that sacred trust. They have failed this community." The sound was back, faint but unmistakable, and this time it was different. It wasn't the loud, churning beat of the news chopper. It was a low, almost subsonic hum, a sound designed to be felt as much as heard. My team. They were close. I had to end this. I had to create a scene that was so undeniably non-hostile that even my team's rigid protocols would force them to pause. "To the people of Havenwood," I said, my gaze intensifying, "this is not a reflection of your town, which has been nothing but welcoming. This is a reflection of a sickness that can infect law enforcement anywhere. It is our collective duty to root it out. And to any other officer who thinks they can use their power to prey on the innocent, know this: we are watching." The hum was louder now, a deep, resonant thrum that vibrated through the soles of my shoes. The cameraman and the reporter exchanged a nervous glance, their professional composure starting to crack. They could feel it too. Something was coming. I had one final card to play. One final message to send, not to the public, but to the men in the sky who were about to descend on us. I looked directly into the camera lens, but my words were for my approaching team. "I want to assure everyone that the situation here is now under control. The suspect is in custody. The scene is secure. I have the full cooperation of Sergeant Frank Miller of the Havenwood PD." I nodded towards the sergeant, who looked like a deer in the headlights. "There is no further threat to myself or to the civilian minor. I am safe. My son is safe." It was the closest I could come to saying "stand down" without compromising my identity on live television. The asset is secure. The threat is neutralized. It was bureau speak, hidden in plain sight. The humming grew into a deep, guttural roar. And then we saw it. Over the ridge, not one, but two sleek, black, unmarked helicopters appeared. They had no lights, no visible insignia, just a menacing, matte black finish that seemed to absorb the light around them. They moved with an unnatural speed and silence, the sound they made less a chop of rotors and more a tearing of the air itself. The news reporter let out an audible gasp. Her cameraman, to his credit, instinctively swung his camera up to capture the incredible sight. Sergeant Miller and Davis stood frozen, their faces etched with pure, undiluted awe and terror. The lead helicopter didn't circle. It didn't hesitate. It dove towards the field next to the overlook, its flight path aggressive and precise. The second peeled off, taking a high orbit position, an angel of death watching over the scene. This was it. The moment of truth. Had my message been received? Had I done enough to de-escalate? The side door of the lead helicopter slid open as it flared for landing, the downdraft from its rotors flattening the tall grass and kicking up a storm of dust and leaves. 4 figures, clad in black tactical gear from head to toe, were visible in the opening. They were braced, weapons held at the low ready. Then a 5th figure appeared. He wasn't in tactical gear. He was wearing a suit, a perfectly tailored, dark gray suit. He stood in the open doorway of the helicopter, one hand holding onto the frame to steady himself against the wind, the other holding a phone to his ear. He looked down at the chaotic scene, at me, at the police cars, at the news camera pointed right at him. And I saw his face. It wasn't a tactical team leader. It wasn't an OPR drone from DC. It was a face I knew as well as my own, a face I hadn't seen in 3 years. Not since the disastrous operation in Istanbul that had left him with a permanent limp and me with a ghost in my heart. It was Deputy Director Carter Thorne, my former partner, my mentor, and the most dangerous man in the FBI. He wasn't supposed to be here. He wasn't supposed to even be on this continent. And the look on his face wasn't relief. It was a cold, calculating fury that had absolutely nothing to do with a small-town cop in North Carolina. He had come here for me. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. Carter Thorne. Here. The wind from the helicopter rotors whipped my hair across my face, a physical manifestation of the storm raging inside me. Of all the possible outcomes I had calculated in the last 10 minutes, his presence was not one of them. A Code 18 alert was serious, but it shouldn't have reached the desk of the Deputy Director of the FBI, much less prompted his personal intervention. This wasn't protocol. This was something else entirely. The tactical team, 4 ghosts in black Kevlar, rappelled from the helicopter with terrifying efficiency, their boots hitting the ground before the skids even touched down. They didn't storm the scene. They formed a perfect diamond-shaped perimeter around the landing zone, their assault rifles pointed outwards, creating an impenetrable bubble of federal authority. They ignored the local cops, the news crew, and even me. Their focus was on securing the deputy director. Thorne stepped out of the helicopter, his movements stiff, but precise. He still had the limp, a slight, almost imperceptible drag in his left leg that only I would notice. He walked out of the dust cloud and onto the asphalt of the overlook, his expensive shoes crunching on the gravel. His eyes, the color of a winter sky, swept across the scene, taking in every detail with the cold, analytical gaze of a predator. He registered Miller in the back of the cruiser, the stunned sergeant, the gawking news crew, and finally, me. His eyes locked on mine, and for a heart-stopping second, the entire world fell away. There was no warmth in his gaze, no relief that I was safe. There was only a cold, hard appraisal, followed by a flicker of something I couldn't quite name. Disappointment? Annoyance? It was the look a master chess player gives a piece that has moved unexpectedly and disrupted the board. The news reporter, sensing the seismic shift in the story, started speaking in a hushed, frantic tone to her cameraman. "Get a shot of him! Who is that? Is that someone from DC?" Thorne's gaze flickered to the camera, his expression tightening with controlled fury. He raised his hand, not in a wave, but a clear, dismissive gesture. One of the tactical officers immediately broke from the perimeter and jogged towards the news crew, his weapon held in a non-threatening but unambiguously firm position. "Ma'am, you need to turn that camera off now," the officer said, his voice a low, gravelly monotone that brooked no argument. "This is a secured federal scene." The reporter started to protest. "This is a public space. We have a right—" "Your rights are temporarily suspended in the interest of national security," the officer stated flatly. "Turn it off, or I will." The red light on the camera blinked off. My broadcast was over. My shield was gone. I was alone with Carter Thorne and his private army. He walked towards me, his limp a steady, rhythmic counterpoint to the slowing thrum of the helicopter rotors. The local cops, Sergeant Miller and Davis, seemed to shrink as he approached, their local authority utterly eclipsed by the sheer power radiating from him. "Agent Williams," he said, his voice exactly as I remembered it, a low, cultured baritone that could soothe a diplomat or terrify a warlord. "You've had a busy afternoon." It wasn't a question. It was an accusation. "Director Thorne," I replied, my voice cool and formal, a mirror of his own. "This is an unexpected surprise. I had a situation. I followed protocol." "Your protocol," he said, stopping a few feet in front of me, "was to request a tactical team, not to host a press conference. You've turned a local jurisdiction issue into a media circus. You've put my face, your face, and a highly sensitive FBI asset, this helicopter, on the 5 o'clock news." His anger was palpable now, a low-burning fire behind the ice in his eyes. He wasn't angry about what Miller did. He was angry about how I had responded. He was angry that I had brought a spotlight to a situation he would have preferred to bury in darkness. "The situation was volatile," I said, holding my ground. "And my son was in the line of fire. I used the tools at my disposal to de-escalate and control the narrative." "You lost control of the narrative the second you made that call, Jada," he said, his use of my first name a subtle, calculated jab. "A code 18 from an agent on personal leave. Do you have any idea the alarms that set off in Langley? We thought you were compromised. We thought someone had found you." "Found me?" My blood ran cold. The phrase was specific. It implied I was hiding. It implied someone was looking. My vacation to a quiet lake town suddenly felt like a terrible, naive mistake. "Found me?" I repeated, my voice barely a whisper. "Who would be looking for me, Carter?" He gave a slight, almost imperceptible shake of his head, his eyes flicking towards the police officers and then towards my car, where Leo was still watching us, a silent, scared observer to a conversation he couldn't hear. The message was clear. Not here. "Your son," he said, changing the subject. "He's secure?" "He's fine. Scared, but fine," I answered, my mind reeling. What was he not telling me? The operation in Istanbul was 3 years ago. The network we had been hunting was dismantled, its leaders dead, or in black sites. The official file was closed. Thorne turned to Sergeant Miller, who looked as if he was about to faint. "You, Sergeant, give me your report." The sergeant stumbled through a summary of the events, his voice cracking, his story punctuated by the angry, muffled shouts of Officer Miller from inside the cruiser. Thorne listened without expression, his gaze unwavering. When the sergeant finished, Thorne was silent for a long moment. "Officer Miller is a federal detainee now," Thorne said finally, his voice leaving no room for negotiation. "He'll be transported to a federal facility. Your department's involvement in this matter is concluded. You will make no statement to the press. You will file no report. As of this moment, this incident is classified. It never happened. Do you understand?" "Yes, sir," the sergeant and Davis said in unison, their relief palpable. They were being offered a way out, a chance to erase the worst day of their careers. Thorne's men moved with chilling purpose. 2 of them opened the cruiser door, pulled the protesting Miller out, and secured him with their own restraints before marching him towards the helicopter. Another officer approached me. "Agent Williams, Director Thorne has instructed me to escort you and the minor to the transport." I looked at Thorne. "Escort us where? Carter, what is going on?" "We're leaving," he said simply. "Your vacation is over. Your leave is revoked." "You can't do that," I protested. "This has to go through channels. I have a right to—" "You have the right to follow my direct orders," he cut me off, his voice sharp as broken glass. "You called in the cavalry, Jada. I'm the cavalry, and I'm telling you, The war you thought was over is not. The people we were hunting in Istanbul, they're not all gone. And a source confirmed this morning that they have your name, not your cover identity, your real name. The world swam before my eyes. Istanbul, the botched exfiltration, the firefight in the spice market, the man I had to leave behind. How? I breathed. Our files were sealed at the highest level. There's a leak, Thorne said, his voice dropping so low only I could hear it. A big one, somewhere inside the bureau. We think your profile was sold, your location, your family status, everything. This stop today, with this cop. He glanced at the cruiser where Miller had been. Maybe it was a coincidence, a racist cop on a power trip. Or maybe it wasn't. Maybe it was a test, a probe to see how you'd react, to confirm you were here. My heart hammered against my ribs. The crooked parking job, Miller's inexplicable rage, his obsession with me. Had it all been a setup, a performance designed to flush me out? We're going to a secure location until we can neutralize the threat and find the leak, Thorne continued. Get your son. We're leaving now. My training was screaming at me to comply. The threat was credible. Thorne was the deputy director. This was a clear and present danger. But something felt wrong. Terribly wrong. The timing of it all. Thorne's sudden appearance. The secrecy. His anger at me for going public. If there was a leak inside the bureau, how could I be sure he wasn't part of it? He was offering protection, but it felt like a cage. My eyes fell on the shattered remains of my work phone on the asphalt. My only independent link to the bureau's network. Destroyed. I was isolated. My only source of information was him. My son is not getting in that helicopter, I said, the words coming out before I could think. The mother had overruled the agent. Not until you tell me everything. Not until I can verify this threat myself. A flicker of genuine anger crossed Thorne's face. We were wasting time. We were exposed. Jada, don't be a fool. You don't have time to verify anything. The threat is here. It's now. Then I'll handle it myself, I said, my hand instinctively moving to the Glock I still held, the one I'd taken from Miller. Thorne's eyes followed my movement. His expression hardened into something I had never seen before, a look of profound, chilling resolve. He took a half step back and raised his hand, signaling his men. The 4 tactical officers who had been holding the perimeter turned in unison. Their rifles came up, the red dots of their laser sights snapping on, not pointing at the local cops, not at the surrounding woods, but directly at me. 4 perfect red dots converged on my chest. You are not handling anything, Agent Williams, Thorne said, his voice as cold and final as a tombstone. You are a material witness and a compromised agent. You have lost your autonomy. You will hand over the weapon, you will get your son, and you will get on that helicopter. That is my final order. Refuse, and my men have been authorized to consider you a hostile combatant. He was going to take me and Leo, by force if necessary. In the middle of this lakeside overlook, surrounded by local cops and a news crew he had just silenced, I was cornered, outgunned, and my only backup was the very man who was threatening me. And in the back of my mind, a single horrifying question took root. Was he here to save me from a threat? Or was he the threat itself? The 4 red dots painted on my chest felt like pinpricks of ice. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat against the sudden, roaring silence. The world had shrunk to the space between me and Carter Thorne, a chasm of broken trust and deadly intent. He had cornered me, using the very protocols designed to protect me as a weapon against me. He was right. I was a compromised agent. But he was wrong about why. I wasn't compromised because an enemy had my name. I was compromised because the man giving the orders was no longer on my side. My mind raced, replaying the last 3 years in a sickening, high-speed montage. The botched Istanbul op, Thorne's convenient injury that pulled him from the field just before the ambush, his rapid, almost unprecedented promotion to deputy director in the aftermath, the leak. It wasn't just a leak, it was him. He had been selling assets, and I was the loose end he'd finally come to tie up. Miller wasn't a probe, he was a patsy, a useful idiot whose bigotry Thorne had exploited to create a public incident, a pretext to swoop in and rescue me. He needed to get me off the grid, to a place where I could be silenced permanently, and he was using the full might of the FBI to do it. Leo. My son's face flashed in my mind. He was watching this, watching his mother get cornered by men with guns. I would not let his last memory of me be one of surrender. "You're right," I said, my voice dangerously calm. I looked Thorne dead in the eye, letting him see the dawning, horrifying realization. I have lost my autonomy. Then I moved. I didn't raise the gun. I didn't try to shoot. That would have been suicide. Instead, I did the last thing he, or his tactical team, expected. I threw the Glock, not at them, but away, sending it skittering across the asphalt towards the stunned news crew. It was a clear, unmistakable act of disarmament. In the split second that their eyes and their training followed the movement of the weapon, I pivoted and ran. Not towards the woods, not towards the helicopter, but straight towards my car. "Mommy!" Leo's shriek was a beacon in the chaos. "Don't shoot! Hold your fire!" Thorne roared, his voice laced with fury. He couldn't afford to have me shot in front of a news crew and local cops. He needed me alive, at least for now. He needed this to look like a clean, professional extraction. I reached the driver's side door, my keys already in my hand. I didn't have time to fumble with the lock. I thumbed the panic button. The car alarm blared to life, a deafening, piercing siren that shattered the tense standoff. It was a meaningless gesture in one sense, but in another it was a signal, a chaotic, desperate "look at me" to the civilian witnesses. This is not a clean extraction. This is an abduction. I wrenched the door open and dove inside, not into the driver's seat, but over it, into the back, with Leo. "Hang on, baby," I yelled, pulling him from his car seat and shielding his body with my own. I wrapped my arms around his head, pressing him against my chest, trying to muffle the sound of the alarm, the shouting, the approaching footsteps. The tactical team was on me in seconds. They were professionals. They didn't smash the windows. They used a pry tool to pop the door lock, and then my door was ripped open. Strong hands grabbed me, trying to pull me out. "He has the intel. Check the boy." Thorne's voice cut through the noise. Intel? What was he talking about? Then I understood. It was a lie, a justification for his men to lay hands on my son. A way to control me. "Don't you touch him!" I screamed, a primal roar of a mother protecting her young. I held onto Leo with a strength I didn't know I possessed, kicking and twisting, making it impossible for them to get a clean grip. But they were too strong, too numerous. A hand grabbed my hair, yanking my head back. Another pressed a pressure point in my neck, sending a jolt of white-hot pain through my body. My grip on Leo faltered, and in that moment when all seemed lost, salvation came from the most unexpected quarter. "Get your hands off her!" It was Sergeant Miller, the local cop, not the disgraced one. He and Davis, seeing a woman and child being violently manhandled, had finally broken. Their instincts, their oaths, had overridden Thorne's terrifying authority. The sergeant had his taser drawn, its red dots dancing on the back of the tactical officer holding me. Davis had his sidearm out, pointed not at Thorne, but at the sky, a clear sign he was prepared to fire a warning shot to escalate this beyond Thorne's control. "This is a federal operation. Stand down," the lead tactical officer yelled. "I don't care if you're the damn Secret Service," the sergeant yelled back, his voice thick with outrage. "You're not assaulting a woman and child in my county. Not on my watch." It was the opening I needed. Thorne was momentarily distracted, his perfect plan crumbling into a messy jurisdictional dispute. The officer holding me loosened his grip, turning to face this new, unexpected threat. I didn't hesitate. I drove my elbow back into his gut, hard. He grunted, stumbling back. I scrambled out of the car, pulling Leo with me. "Carter, it's over," I said, my voice ringing with finality. I wasn't talking to him. I was talking past him. Thorne spun around, a look of pure confusion on his face, and then he heard it. The distinctive sound of multiple sirens growing closer, coming from every direction. When the sergeant had radioed in my Nightingale protocol code, he had indeed thrown a grenade into the system. It had bypassed local dispatch and shot straight up the chain to the state police and the regional FBI field office in Charlotte. And when a mysterious federal order to ground all air traffic is followed minutes later by a live news report showing a firefight, an FBI agent, and a deputy director's unscheduled black helicopter landing, people notice. Real feds. Feds who weren't on Carter Thorne's payroll. Thorne's face went white. He had been so focused on controlling me that he had failed to control the environment. The cavalry was coming, but it wasn't his. It was mine. He looked at me, then at the approaching lights, then at his helicopter. His window of opportunity was gone. He made a decision. He turned and strode back towards his chopper, barking orders at his men. "Collapse the perimeter, we're out." His team disengaged instantly, pulling back with the same chilling efficiency with which they had arrived. They were abandoning the scene, abandoning their mission. A few seconds later, the helicopter lifted off, its downdraft a final, angry roar of defiance. It banked hard and disappeared over the ridge, leaving behind a stunned silence broken only by the approaching sirens. As the first state police cars and unmarked FBI sedans screeched into the overlook, I stood there, holding my trembling son, surrounded by the wreckage of my vacation and the tatters of my career. I was safe. Leo was safe. That was all that mattered. The aftermath was a whirlwind. Statements were taken. The news crew's footage was confiscated as federal evidence. Officer Miller was taken into state, not federal custody, his crimes now the least interesting part of the day's events. I spent 6 hours in a sterile room at the Charlotte Field office, recounting every detail to a very grim-faced assistant director who had flown in from Washington. My testimony, combined with evidence I'd long ago hidden from Thorne after Istanbul, was the final nail in his coffin. The leak wasn't just him. It was a network he had built within the Bureau. My little lakeside incident had inadvertently pulled the pin on the whole rotten enterprise. Thorne was apprehended 2 days later trying to board a private jet to a non-extradition country. His tactical team were all taken into custody. They had been loyal to him, not the Bureau. They offered me a promotion, a desk job in D.C., a medal. I turned it all down. I had looked into the abyss, and I had no desire to spend any more time staring into it. I tendered my resignation. A week later, I was back at the lake. Leo was skipping stones across the water, his laughter echoing in the clear afternoon air. The terror of that day was already starting to fade for him, replaced by the simple, profound joy of being a kid. For me, the scars would remain, but they were reminders, not wounds. I watched him, my heart full. The world is full of monsters, big and small. Some wear uniforms and hide behind small-town authority. Others wear $1,000 suits and hide behind the shield of national security. But for that one day, a disgraced Fed, a rookie cop with a conscience, and a crusty old sergeant had stood together and held the line. We had drawn our own line in the sand and refused to let the darkness cross it. "Mom, look! I got it to skip 5 times!" Leo shouted, beaming with pride. I smiled. A real, genuine smile. "That's amazing, sweetie," I said, walking over to him. "But I bet you can get 6. He grinned and picked up another stone, his eyes focused on the endless shimmering blue of the water. He was safe. He was happy. I had no badge, no gun, no federal authority. But I had him. The job was over. But my mission, my real mission, was just beginning. And I had won.